Hello everyone, I'm Annie Gibbins and you're listening to Memoirs of Successful Women, the podcast where you get to hear candid conversations with fascinating women from around the globe who share aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure their success and what they have learnt along the way. Hello and welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. Today I have the delight of introducing you to Cathy Dimarchos, who is an award-winning mentor, business advisor and coach who works internationally and is an indefatigable philanthropist. She's also a keynote speaker and now an author who is all about believing that knowledge is only of value when shared. I'm going to enjoy talking about that one, Cathy. Cathy is future focused and believes that we can all contribute to lifting the baseline of where people start life across the world, one person at a time. And her business is called Solutions to You, and it was born out of her passion to serve and leave a lasting imprint that enables people to lead the lives that they deserve. Welcome to the program, Cathy.
Thank you, Annie. I'm so excited to be here and to actually share this moment with you. So thanks.
You are welcome. I get the joy of just chatting to women all around the world. And here you are, my fellow Aussie, different states, but not too far away. And I met, for those listening in, I met Cathy actually just recently when we were on the Lady America's Power Summit, and it was just such a delight to meet you, Cathy, and hear about your work, and not only your work, to feel your heart. Your heart is just huge. So let's just dive straight in and actually tell the listeners, why did you start your business and how does it actually help you? If you've got a vision to actually raise the baseline of where people actually start life, which is a really great way of looking at things, you know, rather than trying to help you from total poverty, how do we actually change society? So how does your business actually help you do that?
So I guess my business is actually, what most people would see as business advisory coaching. Yeah. For that, it is, when I go back to what you shared earlier around gifting knowledge, it really is enabling people to understand, I guess, the decisions that I make and why I make them. Most of the time we give advice or we get advice and people actually tell you the path forward. But what sits underneath it is really where the gold actually sits, and understanding the machinations, that actually sit behind those decisions, and also the risks that could actually be applied if you make something slightly different, to what's actually being proposed. But more importantly, I think I've got a really clear vision about, everything that I do is, I ask myself, is this going to get me closer to where I want to be, or is it taking me away from what I want to do? Yeah. And with that, my actual raise the baseline vision is in fact about really gifting knowledge to developing countries, to developing communities, and to the people that actually sit within those communities so that they can become sustainable. They can actually then also share exactly what I have shared with them and pass that information on to others around them and to future generations. So that's how we create the ripple effect. And so, that vision is massive, but I am so clear around what that actually looks like.
You've got clarity. You just need other people to come along and find that clarity, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so when we share it, all of it, so I don't leave any drips behind. I'm very much about, you ask me a question, I will explain to you why I have actually come to that conclusion. And then I'll actually tell you what other things I contemplated and actually, removed out of the equation. So it's that second and third order thinking that I talk about that then actually brings me to that point of crystallization. So that then gives people just a slightly different perspective.
Such a different perspective. Interestingly, though, it's a similar model to the one I've had. I've been a health educationalist CEO, and when I was working with the orthopedic surgeons, they had that model: see one, do one, teach one. You need more than one, but until you're competent, right? You see it till you fully understand, you do it till you fully understand, and then you teach it so that you can pass that on. And that model actually, for me, really resonates that, yes, exactly. Why just hold knowledge, right? And I think a lot of people do this when you're trying to just keep things for yourself, because you then got to get, someone's got to pay you to get more information, that drip feed sort of thing. When you're at your stage of your business and life, you're like, I don't want to hold the gold nuggets. I want to just gift them. They've still got to learn them, still got to apply them, but I'm not actually holding it out to, which is frustrating, which is disempowering to those who are really in need. We're talking people who are really in need here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't just apply to those who are actually in, developing countries or developing communities. It actually is about, enabling us as people of humanity to really change the way that we live life. I've come from a background that is, finance and business. And that actually is all about the bottom line, and whilst that's been instilled in me, there's so many different ways that we can do business that actually enables a win-win outcome. The whole thing is to actually change what the future looks like. It's, where we are today is not where we need to be. And, what we've learned today is not going to help our future generation actually transcend to the position that they need to be, in 10, 20 years time. So we really need to start to shift, how we actually do things.
So you've used your 30 plus years of experience. We're talking significant experience, people listening in business, in finance. I know you've started, you've scaled, you've done all of that. You're an expert in that area, and you started your solutions to your business. Then how have you then been able to balance that? You go from a very commercial model of, maximum profits when you first start your business. Then you suddenly get this revelation, this moment of, hey, I actually need to give back. I actually need to start making that a priority, and I need to practice what I preach. How does that look like for a business model?
So it's interesting that you share that, and there's probably been pinnacle points throughout my career. But when I was in finance and I was in my middle 20s, Annie, I was privileged in some ways. I had suicidal clients. That was actually during the GFC, really difficult time. And it's interesting, but I look back, years later as to why I made decisions that I did. But back then, in that moment, the only thing that I could think of was, oh my gosh, what a privilege that she's actually reached out to me. Like, out of everybody that she knows, I'm looking after her finances. Like, she's reached out to me. And this was the first clients in that space. But that actually made me realize that I could be a genius at anything from a skills perspective at work.
Yeah.
But if I didn't know how to actually hold the space and actually be present, then I really am not serving. And so that changed, one of my early trajectories in my career. So whilst I stayed in finance, and by the way, this client actually was safe, I kept her on the phone until her partner came home. But in that moment, I realized, and it took a while because there's a lot of processing that happens. I decided to actually become a qualified counsellor. So I studied for 4 years and became a qualified counsellor, and I practiced for 3 years whilst I stayed in finance. Because for me, that there's a difference in actually being theoretical to actually practicing and living experiences. And so therefore, I guess in many ways, I've had that balance, even though I've had that rigor and that structure of, working towards a net profit and, scaling. there has always been that humanitarian element in me. So that was, one point. And then I bring it back, and there have been many in between. But, then 7 years ago, I've had another moment where when Ebola had broken out, my 16-year-old at the time, said, well, next year I'm going to be finishing school, Mum. So before I start uni, I'm going to volunteer in orphanages. And I went, great. We have all as a family contributed and paid things forward for years, right? Great. But as she did her research, she came back and sat at the dining table and said, well, I know where I'm going. I'm going to Africa. Well, you can imagine my husband sitting at the other end of the dining table.
What part of Africa?
Yes, exactly that. He's going, no, you're not. Like, do you know what's happening in Africa?
Yeah.
And she said, but Dad, that's on the West Coast. I'm going to the East Coast. And I'm looking at her, and I'm looking at, I guess, the trauma that's actually sitting with my husband, in that moment. And my son looks at me and he says, well, go on. You're solution focused. Go on. Where's this going to go?
I love the Mauser babes.
Right. And so in that moment, I'm sitting there thinking, you know what, this is a moment where it's really important that everybody's heard. So as I sat there and listened to her, she said, well, my friends are going to the US and Canada and Fiji, and that's not going to create impact. And so, it became a discussion, which wasn't just in that moment. It took her a long time because, of course, she also wanted to spend time living with a Maasai. And so,
she's all in.
Yeah.
I love it.
So it was negotiating, it was all those skills that I had actually learned in finance, the critical risk, the negotiating, the really listening so that I could better understand. And so we came up with a solution, and that was, okay, you can go for the first month and you can actually stay with projects abroad in a really, secure environment. And then I'm going to join you for the next 2 months. Now, Annie, you know what? I really don't know how that was actually mitigating risk, but it made sense to me at the time, right?
Like, if we're just a month in, don't worry, Mum's going to be there.
Yeah, that's right. So if anything happens, we'll both be in huge
riding
trouble.
on your white horse, to go and wrap her up and put out. Love it.
So anyway, that's how my next stage really, I guess, sort of came to fruition. So whilst we were there, we did all sorts of things. We worked in crisis centres. We actually dug trenches. We taught English with a Maasai. We actually put in a water tank that we personally funded. Just really, really incredible stuff that really made me pause. Really hard discussions, even recognizing, my own bias, my own privileges, they were like extenuated. And so we cried a lot, that's for sure. Quite a lot, not because, of the challenging moments or the challenging times, but because we were so naive, in truly understanding what happens in, places that we have no concept of.
Mm-hmm.
It's even now, I look back and I go, oh my gosh, what a privilege that we were actually embraced, by all these people who really knew nothing of us. And I'm not just talking about with the Maasai, I'm talking about with the families that we actually lived with in Tanzania, and I call them family now. I have continued to mentor, one of their daughters, and that has actually led to a whole array of things. And she's now a facilitator for my programs that I run over there.
Wow.
So I really, I've got this incredible belief that when people cross paths, there's a reason. We need to pause, right? Just like we have.
Yeah.
We've paused to actually better understand, what is it that we really want to do, and how can we actually collaborate, and, where does this actually lead? And so whenever I actually travel, that's a big part of what I do. I like to live with people, not stay in a, yes, I do stay in nice hotels, but part of my journey is actually about living in homes. So, that's where you really start to, I guess, understand who you are as a person, and how much richness there is in so many different cultures. So that journey led to so many changes in my life. Well, the beginning of me wanting to, I guess, contribute, to find more of what I could do that would genuinely create impact. And so, there were a few stepping stones in between. From that stage, I have been back to Tanzania many times now. I've taken friends, I've taken family, my daughter's gone back. And in each stage, we actually develop different friendships, different scenarios, so working in a crisis center, for babies, where babies are actually still in embryonic sacs and they're just left because the mother is so young, she doesn't even know what she could do for herself. So now what I do is I run leadership programs for young children over there, starting from the age of 12, and there's 4 different programs.
Yeah.
So everything that I do, Annie, is it going to get me closer to this, or is it not? So that's how I live my life. I know where I want to be. Everything that I do is a minimum of 18 months out. I know 5 years where I'm going to be, and there's milestones in between. And then it's about bringing others on that journey with me and making sure that, they rise as I keep stepping forward. So there's a lot of things in between there, but, that gives you an overview.
Wow, what a transformational journey. And I do relate in probably a smaller way. I remember when we went to Cambodia, we didn't go to Africa, but we did do that same sort of choices. When our kids were young, we went and said, right, we're going to Cambodia and Laos, and we wanted to spend 3 weeks working in an orphanage. And then it had to be that whole exploration of, are they legit orphanages?
Yeah.
Are they real orphanages? What do we have to bring? We brought ridiculous things that were totally inappropriate, like bouncy balls that you think would be really great, and then it just rolls down a drain, because they don't have gates, things that you just go, oh, how stupid are we? Or we bought coloring book, we remember we're bringing a coloring book, and you could see them looking at it going, did you bring paper? And we're like, why would we just bring a ream of paper? They go, because one coloring book for 50 kids isn't going to go very far. They all have to trace that picture so that no one touches the coloring book. And we're like, what? This journey of who do you stay with? And I agree with you. When we stay in the family, because the kids are a bit like that, going, where are we staying? And we're going with, we're in a community, because that's beneath the beautiful, right? But it is more than beautiful. It's beneath the gloss that you then commute and you took to the area and do your service. When you're actually staying with these families, but how generous they are, and how, it's amazing. It's never ceased to surprise me when areas of when people have what we would consider significant lack, how generous they are with everything that they have. Absolutely incredible and transformational. And I know it was from my kids. So it's really interesting having this conversation with you, that it was actually your daughter who instigated that for you. Yep. And it really has, by the sound of things, changed your entire family life. This has just now become, she must be pretty impressed with herself leading you in this direction. And you must be pretty proud as a mum with her.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I mean, even from a career perspective, she has just finished doing 5 years as a disability care worker, and so you really start to see who your children are, by the choices that they make. And, whilst I definitively cannot actually say that, all the experiences of the volunteer work that we have done across the globe, over the years, has in some ways contributed to the lens that they have about, who they choose to be as they step forward. So, it's interesting, isn't it?
So how do you then now maintain that, from funding it? It's very different, saving up some money, going to be a blessing, to then being confronted to the point of, wow, I actually need to make this part of my life. And, it's all the way over in Tanzania. How do I set that up? How do you integrate that into a business model so that you can fund things? How do you then bring others on your journey? You mentioned a beautiful phrase before, that when you rise, you bring others rise with you. And I'm totally all in for that. So tell me a little bit about that. What has it meant for you, and how have you reevaluated things to make sure that you've got that ongoing, sustainable opportunity and value that you're then giving them?
So it's interesting, when I decided to literally walk away from a paid job with nothing ahead of me, and I mean nothing, it was with such clarity, and it's really strange. If anybody had said that to me, and I would have gone, can we just rethink this? Yes,
That's
exactly
right.
like that.
As a business coach, that's 101. Don't leave the day job, go a side hustle.
Yes. But I was really fortunate, and I'm very much about values and boundaries. Like, I do not cross my boundaries for anybody and for no amount of money. So there came a time where I needed to make a decision, and that decision was, that's it. I'm no longer aligned with what's actually happening around me. So I walked literally into nothing. But the universe actually somehow, I don't know, listens, or sees what has actually happened. And so almost within, I would say, a week of me walking, I had somebody who was a client of mine in a different life reach out to go, Cathy, can I actually ask you? I know I'm always asking you questions, but blah, 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 blah. And that led into work. So I instantly walked into consulting.
Wow.
Without even looking for work. And that's how all of my business has been. It's been referral people who have actually crossed my path. So I'm really blessed like that. But I had also made a conscious decision that my work also was going to be, seeing I made such a conscious decision to walk and to make it purposeful. I had also actually committed for the next 18 months. So you see my 18-month cycle comes into play with everything.
I love it.
I had actually committed that for me to genuinely show that I am actually, talking and walking the same tune, I had committed to actually doing a minimum of 16% of my work, so advisory work, coaching, mentoring, would be pro bono. To companies that were of a social enterprise outlook, to businesses that actually had a social enterprise outlook.
Wow.
And I was fortunate, in that regard, that I could afford to do that.
Yeah.
And so as I actually looked, at everything around me, it was, I'm a finance person, so I forecast, I budget, that's actually my place of genius. So it was, how do I do this so that I can, that when I get to that end period, I now can actually fund what I need to. And so it is in budgets, also around what I need to do. I know, for the next 18 months. And so I know the next 18 months, I know how much I'm actually funding in Tanzania. I know what it's going to cost me. So that actually comes out of any income that I generate actually goes to paying it forward. And so I'm always planning ahead, and I have 18 months, in my pool of funds already available. But if others want to contribute, because this is about scaling, it's then actually the strategy that kicks in as to how I'm going to do that. And so, one of the bigger pieces is going to be that entrepreneurial piece, which is the incubator. Because there's so much more involved in that. So it's actually about having that alignment and the right people on the journey, and having, I guess, people of genius as part of that vision with me, which I do have, and I'm really lucky like that. But it's also having impact contributors. So if people want to actually donate, well, it's not just about donating.
Yeah.
Sorry, you got to give me your time, because that's how we really create impact. Yeah. It's not just by handing over money. And that's one thing that I don't like, is, people going, well, I'm going to give, X amount. I don't want it. That's not what I'm about. It's actually about showing you how to actually live a purposeful life That's what my entire business is about. That's who I am as a person. So that's how I actually work, Addie.
Yeah.
I know how many children I actually will be funding for the next 18 months. And so therefore the work is already forecasted in advance. But from a scalability point of view, it's then actually the next 18 months ahead that I actually plan for. So very much about planning. I'm a creator of milestones and making numbers actually make sense.
Yeah. Which is not most people's genius zone, right? They just go, oh, here's a need, have some money, don't think about it. And that's right. You need someone who has your genius skills to be able to, tell the story of that, what it means. And also not just a once off. There's so many times that you can go, you can feel good. That's when it's totally about you. You feel good because you've just given some money, and then go, okay, that guilt, that reason, whatever it was, is now, it goes away, right? But it's all about when you're in that, or when you're on the other side, it's like, no, I need a sustainable framework. I've got a budget here that if I'm serving this many people and they're now depending on that, and we're not just trying to maintain, we're trying to progress, actually trying to move forward. This is actually a business in itself. I need to run it like a business, because it is, in essence. Otherwise you pour on love and expectation, and then nothing comes through, and that's actually worse. It actually is worse because you've changed the expectation.
Oh, big time. It's in many ways it's actually detrimental. Because you've given them, I guess, an insight, an understanding of what else is actually out there, and then you leave them hanging, right? Because
that's worse. It's actually really cruel, I think.
So I'm very mindful, I'm very conscious that it has to actually be sustainable. Otherwise it's just not, it's not going to work. You're not serving anybody else, you're serving yourself, and I'm not about band-aid fixing.
How do you cope with the fact that enough it's never enough? So the other side, you're a wealthy person from the West who comes over and runs this program, but there's unlimited needs. There's how do you push back and be firm, and because your heart must break. You must just see opportunities absolutely everywhere going, I wish I could. How do you keep that framework of, no, I'm actually going to just do what we can do, and I have to shut that out, and I have to say no?
That was all the tears, how I said with my daughter. That's what that was all about, Annie. It was like just seeing so much and knowing that, am I doing enough? And I think I then have my counseling hat that kicks in, that says, well, if you actually stretched any more, what impact would that have long term? Because you've got to think long term. And I go, well, it's not sustainable. So my question then is, well, who do I actually know? Who can I actually bring on the journey that aligns with my values? Because if they don't align with my values and they have the means, then it's not going to work again either. So I have to have that synchronicity, happening the whole time. So I can only do what I can do. I have to accept that.
Exactly. I know it's the hardest thing in life, I think. Once you actually get into your area of genius, your total passion, you're living your purpose, suddenly you see opportunity everywhere. This is the most amazing thing. When people go, I don't know what to do, nothing's so. I tell you what, once you're actually totally in your lane, you're just like in that zone. You get ridiculous opportunities everywhere. It's actually quite the opposite, and it is a real heartfelt skill to learn, to be able to stay focused, to be able to do what you do. And I love the way you phrase that. That's right. As you stretch yourself, then you're going to get breadth, but you're not going to get quality, and you're not going to do anything well. And also you're not then going to be able to sustain that ongoing, because you'll burn yourself out, you'll quit, it's all just too hard, you'll get depressed, because it is really sad, and the cycle continues. Tell me about the experience you had writing your book, Same People, Different Vision.
Oh, gosh, I got asked the other day, what's something that most people don't know about you? And I had to sit and think, and I thought, I'm going to share how that book came about, because that's something that a lot of people don't know. So in moments of crisis, in trauma, chaos, that's when I actually am at my best. I have that clarity. And so that book actually came about from a pretty traumatic time in my life. It was actually just before the pandemic really shut down our country. I was flying back from a speaking engagement. It was Friday the 13th of March. I was flying back from Perth on, I think, one of the very last flights. And it was actually, my father hadn't been well, but he was going to be discharged on the following Wednesday. So I was arranging doctor's appointments at an optometrist for him. But by Tuesday, I got a phone from the hospital to say he had had a fall. That fall actually led to a bleed on the brain. And it was really serious. By the Friday, and my mum and dad actually lived an hour and a half away from me. So I went and stayed with my mum, and so we were doing the daily trips into the hospital. But by Friday, we arrived into the car park at the hospital, and my mum actually went into cardiac arrest.
Your mum?
Yeah,
oh,
and so I was struggling, to move her. So I rushed to get staff from the hospital out to see her, and she ended up having to be transported to a different hospital because they didn't have a cardiac team in the hospital that my dad was at. So in that period, I was rushing off with mum, and I was calling my brother to come down to see my dad and my family to go and stay with dad. So this is the pandemic in full blown shutdown now we're in. My dad passed away on the Saturday, and my mother didn't get to see him to say goodbye. When my mother recovered, her blood pressure was running at 229, and that stayed at 229. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
For 24 hours. And I actually said to the registrar, I'm going to discharge her. And he said, she's critical. And I said, I'm not having two parents pass away in a hospital, not within 24 hours. I'm discharging her into my care, and I'm taking her back to Sydney. Now, as much of a risk that was going to be, Annie, I was prepared to take it. Well, I'm glad to say it was a good decision, because my mum is still with me, and it was a very, very slow recovery because she couldn't walk, she wasn't eating, she wasn't talking for months. And so I lived, in our lounge room with my mum 24/7, for just over 2 months. Because she needed to feel me constantly.
Yeah.
So in that moment, it was, I need to do more. I need to be more. And that's when the book came to life. So I started writing. And then I actually started to do the leadership development programs in Tanzania. So I went online. I reached out to Helen and said, get your trips together. I'm going to actually do pro bono work. I know what your actual values are. They align with mine. And so that's how it all started. So it was in that moment of crisis where I go, right, I need to be doing something totally different. This is the reason why I'm actually experiencing all of this. And so that's how my book came about.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm just processing the whole scenario. It just must have just been beyond crazy. That's right. You're thinking your father could obviously pass, your mum's then having heart attacks, it's all happening. And that's right, making these big decisions and what's right for you. And what a time to birth the seeds of a book, and then to be able to do that. But sometimes, we actually need to go out of our comfort zone. Is when we do, even if we're actually good in crisis mode, we still have limits, right? And I talk about it like it's the pendulum. Sometimes that pendulum just goes whack, and you go, wow, that moment was more than I'm actually okay to I'm still processing, but it seeds, it pushes you to actually confirm things like what you've mentioned a number of times in this conversation, your values, on how clear you are. And I wonder those listening in, you know, are you clear? If I actually asked you, what are your top 3 values? Would you be able to tell me? You know, having that clarity of mind, clarity of purpose, and then that can happen in these times of great stress, right? Because you have to make a decision. You have to have a stand. You have to say, if I'm going to take a risk, what is that risk and why am I taking it? And what is the reason behind that? It's the 4 whys, right? You know, of just, I keep asking yourself why, and then why that, and why that. And because you needed to make it more of your life. You know, you needed to be there for your mum because she's already in a critical situation. You needed to just reevaluate that balance on your life, which, you know, all of us need to do at stages of transition, you know, and they're not all these stages of transition around when you have kids or when the kids leave home or if a relationship breaks down. Often those stages of transition are actually because just stuff's happening in your life that you haven't experienced before, or it's changed your view on things, and suddenly it does take you a moment to shut down and reevaluate. Sometimes it's surprising. Sometimes you don't even want it. You know, you've leaned into it. Other people go, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm getting dragged in this direction. I don't think I want it, but that's probably going to be because of the fears. You know, particularly the fear when you're good at everything. What if I'm not good at it? What if it fails? What if it's embarrassing? What if people tell me I'm crazy leaving my day job? Right. You know, this is the cocktail, which is why I love having these conversations, and they're raw and they're authentic, because we have these moments, you know, and you look at successful women, who's on my program, all successful women are having these moments in their life that they go, yeah, who am I? What do I stand for? How am I going to make this happen? And then also for you, you're a classic example. Well, what does success mean to you? And so we'll tap into that question to you, because that's a different response to absolutely everybody based on your values and your choices and what you've shared today.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Success for me actually isn't about me. It really is, you know, whoever I'm actually either engaged with or in the presence of, it's truly actually understanding what they want. You know, so I turn up to whatever it is, listening so that I actually understand how I can serve them. And when I serve them, because I actually know what outcome they want, then I know that I have achieved success, because they have achieved success. So success to me is not about, you know, money. It's not about, it's really nothing to do with anything other than, what do you really want? You know, what is it that I can genuinely help you to do today, tomorrow, in 18 months? Genuinely. Because for me, nothing is impossible. It's just about navigating your way through. And I'll take you there, but you've got to be to join you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, success is for you.
Yeah. And that's how you pay it forward, and that's how you lift the baseline. Because you're teaching people to actually go, yeah, that's right. How can I help you? Because if I help you, you'll have a generational effect. You know, I used to be like that when I was a couple of lives ago when I was a nursing teacher. That was it. Someone came in. I had quite a number of African refugee students, and they were so excited because if they got this certificate, it meant that they were then going to demonstrate to their children that they had a qualification. And then I remember one day when one of them rang me up and said he'd gone from, you know, he'd done certificate 3 with me and 4, and then he'd actually become a registered nurse, like, so over the years. And then he said, you know, I had to tell you because this will change generations. You know, now I'm a professional, like a real legit professional, and the beaming face, and it wasn't for him, you know, and that's what the more I got to know him and his journey, it wasn't actually about him at all. It was about him saying, I have now set a framework that my children will automatically think they will go to university because their dad didn't and their mum. They will then pass that on, and that's just such a blessing, and that's what brings us the joy, right? I know. I think we're very
Absolutely.
much aligned in that. That's my big buzz too. I just go, that's how can I help? And then when they get those wins, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you, because that's just the ripple effect. That really is the ripple effect. And that's what our mission is, to be able to really, that's right, have positively impact the planet while we're on it, and then to be confident that we are, you know, all working to create a better future for generations to come, you know. And we can only do our little bit, right? You know, that's right. As soon as you're into whatever space you're in, you look left, you look right, and there's just so many opportunities. But if we all do our bit, that's all we can do. Right? Why are your values so strong? I must admit, I've spoken to like over 100 people on my podcast, and I just feel values oozing out of you. Why is that? Why has that become such a significant, you know, you go up front, I'm non-negotiable. I know my values. This is who I am. I'll only partner with people. You know, you don't get that many people who are, just put it even as a preface. Right? It's really strong. I love your strength and your boldness and your clarity of mind. Where does that come from?
You know, it was really interesting that you say that. So I've just finished writing another book, and as I was rereading it, Annie, it actually drew me back to, I guess, my lived experiences with my grandmother. You know, my father was ill for most of my life. And so my mother actually was so busy, I guess, working. So I was raised by my grandmother. And I remember as a child, you know, almost living in this dichotomy of languages. You know, everybody's sitting and actually having the same discussion, but everybody walked away with a different interpretation of what had actually happened. You know, and so when I look back at those, I think about what was really important through those moments, which is where the values actually come out to play. And so one thing that I know that my father actually taught me, that despite what differences people may have, at the core of everything is people. And when you value people, that's it, value people for who they are, then anything else can actually be resolved. So, you know, at the core of everything, you know, that's why my business is actually about people advisory, people and business advisory. So people come first. And so I think it really only just dawned on me. I didn't realize that I was so passionate about it, but until people started to say, you know, you actually really talk about that a lot. Which you did too, right?
There you go, really?
Yeah. But I even actually, that's built into my programs, value boundaries. You know, and when we have that defined, then I think everything else around us has a lot more clarity. And so we build, that's the foundation of what I build everything that I do. It is, you know, my actual values, my really clear boundaries, and then everything else is quite fluid, you know. So I hope that explains it.
Oh, I absolutely love it. And to the point of, you know, we're all about, you know, helping women globally rise up, and gender equality, issues of diversity and inclusion, and all these important topics and missions that we're on, that we're striving towards. But you can't do that if you actually don't respect individuals, people's values, their positions, having boundaries with certain areas that you're discussing, having a true openness and transparency around who you are, owning that, and also having that same respect to someone else, right? It's when you don't actually know who you are, you haven't clarified that, then how do you then communicate that? How do you show up every day as that person? It is confusing to people. And therefore, you know, human nature is opportunistic. They will take advantage of that, right? Because that's the way the world works, unfortunately. And so when you have that clarity around, you know, your essence, the reason you're born to be on this planet, what your genius zone is, how you can then coordinate. I love the way that you've got your people and finance. See, you wouldn't have thought before this interview that would be a mix, but it totally works, and it's become your niche. And it's because that's right. Under everything is people. I know that, running companies, that's right. People often just go, oh, it's just the staff. I go, oh my gosh, they are the machine. You don't go to the core and value people and appreciate people and support what they're doing and listen to their real life and lived experience. Then it doesn't matter what you're trying to achieve, it won't actually happen. So your principles of what you're sharing in all of your programs is just so spot on, and I just think you're just such a high quality woman that, seriously, if you haven't got to know Cathy Dimarchos before, listeners, you definitely should reach out to her. How do they find you, Cathy? What's the best way to contact you?
So solutions2you.com.au, and it's the number 2, all one word. So solutions with an S, and then the number 2, and then you.com.au. And I actually have a free 15-minute consult, so you can tap in at any time just to have a chat. For me, that gifting of knowledge is actually really important. Just like Annie, we're all actually here to contribute. So it's actually finding what it is that you want from the person that has actually achieved it. Reach out, don't hold back. I think that's the other thing, Annie, isn't it? I think we hold back from asking for help. Please don't.
No, please don't. That's been our life lesson, isn't it? If we knew that little gem years ago, gee, I would have started asking for more 20 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, definitely don't hold back, everyone. Go to Solutions to You. Contact Cathy if you're actually wanting to talk about a couple of things. We've gone to the breadth of opportunities in this conversation today. Definitely if you're interested in doing humanitarian works, AIDS, she doesn't want to just see your cash. She wants to see your heart. She wants to see your commitment. She wants to see that your values align and that you're actually there for the real deal, the long haul. So if that is you and this conversation is actually just called on your heartstrings a little bit, reach out and have one of those initial conversations and explore that. Also, if you actually want to start putting people first in your business and need some major financial expertise with someone who's even got counseling qualifications, I mean, this woman is just so broad. I want you to reach out to Cathy as well. And she is going to be such a blessing to you and your world. Thank you so much for being on my program today, Cathy. It's been an absolute delight.
Oh, Annie, it's been such a joy. We've laughed. You've made me actually pause and to hold back tears as well. It's nice to actually get to know a little bit more about you too. And thank you to all the listeners. I think you can see through our conversation today, it's really just about being who you are and just embracing that and stepping forward into life.
Absolutely. Live your best life, love who you are, and always give back to others along the way. Thanks so much, Cathy.
Thank you. Thanks, Annie. It's been a joy.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Memoirs of Successful Women. You can find me at anniegibbins.com, where you can download my free resources, get connected on social, and check out my online magic transformation program. If you love this show, feel free to subscribe to future episodes and, of course, share it with your friends. I'll see you again soon, and until then, happy podcasting.